This is Queer Across America, my journey around the United States checking out queer areas in each city to show that no matter where you are, there's a community for you. I decided to take a train for the very first time in my life because nobody had ever told me that the Amtrak goes all the way around the country. Well, actually, it misses pretty large chunks, especially compared to European public transportation. But for where I was going, it was perfect. It was a long 39-hour ride from Denver, Colorado to Chicago, Illinois. But thankfully, the Amtrak was surprisingly nice. It was one of those double-decker trains, so I got one of the top seats so I could overlook the nature as we drove through it. However, that nature was in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. After almost 2 full days of being on the train without any sleep, I finally arrived in Chicago. I didn't know a whole lot about the city, but I did have a lot of friends that visited often. So when I asked them where I should stay, the answer was unanimous. It had to be in Boystown. I knew that Boystown was a party city because my friends would often visit and disappear for weeks at a time on long benders. That wasn't really what I was looking for in this trip, but I wanted to check out the city either way. Immediately, I noticed that there were rainbow flags and trans flags everywhere. But that didn't really separate it from any other queer city I had been to. What did separate it, though, was the Legacy Walk. Legacy Walk was a series of sculptures throughout Boystown that presented mini biographies of notable people in queer history. This was a lot different than any other queer city I had been to before. Usually the cities were dedicated to nightlife and partying in the bars. Not that there's anything wrong with that because God knows I love drinking. But it was nice to see that there was something more to the community than just the nightlife. And that's not to say that Chicago wasn't like that. But it was nice to see that they also had a piece of history ingrained throughout the city. God forbid somebody actually learned something, but the opportunity is there in Chicago. Right after stumbling out of the bar. Next, I decided to check out a queer bookstore. Unabridged Books was by far one of the best bookstores I had ever been to. The queer section was massive. I was happy to see so many queer books in one place. Not only that, but they had sections that weren't usually seen in bookstores and didn't really receive the attention that they deserve. Sections like lesbian fiction, queer nonfiction, queer manga, and an area that showcased local authors. Each city I visit, I try to pick up a book from a local author, preferably someone queer that talks about the city. I got really lucky this time because I came across this book called Queer Legacies. Author John D'Amelio recounts a lot of queer history in the Chicago community. He dives deep into the archives of oral history that the city of Chicago keeps. After I walked over to the AIDS garden that was on the shore of Lake Michigan. I was blessed with pretty nice weather, but the wind when it picked up was absolutely freezing. The AIDS garden had a giant sculpture that was dedicated to those that lost their lives to AIDS. The area was a little disappointing. There just wasn't a whole lot, and unless you looked closely at a QR code that was somewhat buried in the bushes, you would never know what the sculpture was and what it was meant to symbolize. I really liked how the city of Chicago dedicated so much to the memory of those lost to AIDS. Rosehill Cemetery was a beautiful cemetery. It was the first burial place for those that were lost to HIV. It was interesting to walk around the area because it was such a serene cemetery that it was hard to believe that it was in the middle of such a busy city. finally time to visit the Leather Archives and Museum. I didn't know what I was expecting walking into it, but the museum did not disappoint. There's quite a bit that I can't include in this video, just because of the nature of the sex-positive museum. But I will say that it was such an eye-opening experience. I didn't realize just how rich and prominent leather was in the queer community, and that it did it so far back, really hitting a peak in the 70s and 80s, but starting off way before. The leather community was basically a hangout for people that were sex positive and enjoyed exploring kink and played with power dynamics within relationships. I learned that there was a lot of leather competitions throughout queer history. Now, these competitions were basically pageants, but with a focus on leather. I had only been to one before, and it was a ton of fun. There were categories like any other pageant that included fashion and talent, and even a Q&A portion, and asking the contestants how they will represent the community. Most of these competitions have a fundraising aspect where contestants raise money and donate it to different sections of the community that need it at that time. The most surprising part about the museum was how much was dedicated to women and trans people within the leather community. This is surprising because I feel like there's been a lot of discrimination within the leather community towards anyone that didn't present themselves as being hyper-masculine. I was happy to see that this museum dedicated half, if not more, time to highlighting cis and trans women and trans men. Towards the end of the museum was the archives, which was my favorite part. It was a room with a ton of books, and the significance of those books was so important. Many of those books were once contraband. Because of the queer content of these books, it was illegal to have or distribute them for so long. Now there was a museum full of them. These books still existing is a testament to how resilient the queer community is. Once again, there's a ton of stuff that I can't show in this video, especially the titles of these books. They are wildly inappropriate, with titles such as and. I feel like too many queer cities are happy to elevate the present while trying to brush away the past. But Chicago does an excellent job of preserving that history and presenting it with the present. There was so much to do in Chicago that 3 days was not nearly enough. I plan on being back very soon, so if you have any recommendations for things to check out, please let me know in the comments. I will forever be grateful for a like and subscribe because it helps me continue this project of showcasing queer communities around the country. Check out some of my other videos and let me know what city I should visit next.